Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather here to reflect on the journey of a remarkable individual, someone whose name is synonymous with resilience, leadership, and an unwavering commitment to the people. A man who started as a sportsman, achieved greatness, and then chose a path filled with struggle, sacrifice, and the dream of a better nation. From the very beginning, he was not just another athlete. He was a fighter, a dreamer, and a leader. When he led his team to a historic victory, he did not just lift a trophy, he lifted the hopes and aspirations of an entire nation. That moment of triumph was more than just a win in sports. It was a symbol of determination, unity, and the power of believing in oneself. But his ambitions did not stop at the cricket field. He took his fame and influence and directed it toward a noble cause. He built a hospital, a place where the poorest could receive treatment for a disease that had once touched his own family. It was not just an institution, it was a beacon of hope, proving that nothing is impossible if one is determined enough. Then he took the most unexpected turn. He stepped into the world of politics. Many laughed at him, doubted him, and dismissed him as an outsider. But he was not one to be discouraged. Year after year, he fought against the deeply rooted systems of corruption, injustice, and inequality. He gave voice to the unheard, challenged the status quo, and inspired millions to believe in change. His journey to leadership was not easy. It was filled with setbacks, betrayals, and immense challenges. But each time he fell, he rose again, stronger, more determined, and more passionate. When he finally achieved his dream of leading the country, he carried the weight of expectations on his shoulders. His vision was clear: to build a self-reliant nation, free from corruption, where justice prevails for all. However, the path of reform is never smooth. He faced opposition from powerful forces, both within and outside the system. Every move he made was scrutinized, every decision challenged. Yet his resilience never faded. He continued to fight, to speak, to stand for what he believed was right. Today, his name is more than just a name. It is a symbol of hope, struggle, and unshakable belief in a better future. Whether one agrees or disagrees with his policies, no one can deny the impact he has made. He has redefined politics, empowered the youth, and left a mark that will be remembered for generations. His journey is a testament to the power of perseverance. It teaches us that leadership is not about positions but about purpose. It is about standing firm, even when the tides are against you. And most importantly, it is about never giving up on the dream of a brighter tomorrow. There are few individuals in history who managed to transition from one field of excellence to another with the same level of determination, skill, and influence. Some people become legends in one domain, but only a handful go on to redefine their legacy in an entirely different sphere. The story of this remarkable man is one such example, a journey that began on the cricket field and eventually led him to the corridors of power. His early years were spent mastering the art of cricket, a sport that was more than just a game in his country. Cricket was a source of national pride, a symbol of unity, and a reflection of the country's resilience. From a young age, he displayed an extraordinary level of discipline, focus, and self-belief. These were the same qualities that would later define his leadership in the political arena. As a sportsman, he was not just any player. He was a visionary. He understood that winning was not just about skill but about mindset, strategy, and the ability to inspire a team. His leadership on the field was marked by a relentless pursuit of victory, a refusal to accept defeat, and an unwavering belief in his team's potential. His defining moment came when he led his team to a historic victory, a moment that remains etched in the hearts of millions. This triumph was not just a cricketing achievement, it was a symbol of hope, resilience, and national pride. It proved that with the right leadership, even the most impossible dreams could become reality. But unlike many sports icons who choose to bask in the glory of their victories, he saw a bigger purpose for his life. He could have settled for a comfortable life, celebrated as a hero, and enjoyed the privileges that come with fame. Instead, he chose to serve. He realized that the same principles that guided him in cricket, discipline, hard work, and the ability to inspire, could be applied to a much larger battlefield, the struggle for his nation's future. His transition from sports to leadership was not immediate or easy. He faced skepticism, criticism, and countless obstacles. Many doubted whether a sportsman could understand the complexities of governance, politics, and national affairs. But he was never one to back down from a challenge. He took the lessons he had learned from the cricket field, the ability to strategize, to make tough decisions under pressure, and to lead from the front, and applied them to his new mission. His journey is a testament to the idea that true leadership is not confined to a single field. It is about vision, resilience, and the courage to challenge the status quo. Whether on the field or in the world of politics, he remained true to his principles. He understood that leadership is not about personal gain, but about uplifting those who put their faith in you. His story is an inspiration to millions, proving that one can reinvent oneself, defy expectations, and fight for a cause greater than personal success. From a cricket captain to a national leader, his transformation was driven by a deep sense of responsibility toward his people and his unwavering belief that change was possible. There are moments in history that define a nation, moments that transcend sports, politics, and everyday struggles to become a source of collective joy and identity. One such moment came when this man led his team to a historic World Cup victory. It was not just a cricket match, it was a battle of resilience, strategy, and unshakable belief. This victory changed not only the course of his life, but also the way an entire nation saw itself. In the years leading up to this monumental triumph, his journey was anything but smooth. His team faced criticism, setbacks, and moments of despair. They were not considered favorites to win, and many doubted whether they could withstand the pressure of competing on the world stage. However, what set him apart as a leader was his ability to inspire confidence even in the darkest moments. He instilled in his team a mindset of never giving up, a philosophy that would later define his career in politics as well. Throughout the tournament, he carried the weight of expectations on his shoulders. His leadership was not just about giving directions on the field, it was about rallying his players, making them believe in their potential, and pushing them to perform beyond their limits. Every match was a test of endurance, and every decision he made played a crucial role in shaping the team's journey. Then came the final, the most defining moment of his sporting career. The stadium was packed, millions were watching, and the hopes of an entire nation rested on his team's performance. The pressure was immense, but he remained composed. He led from the front, demonstrating the same fighting spirit that had brought him so far. With strategic decisions, timely interventions, and an unwavering focus, he guided his team to an unforgettable victory. As the final wicket fell and the celebrations erupted, the world saw more than just a team lifting a trophy. They saw a leader who had transformed doubt into belief, struggle into success, and a group of individuals into champions. That moment was about more than just cricket. It was about national pride. It was a reminder that no challenge was too big, no dream too impossible, and no setback too great to overcome. For the people of his country, this victory was more than a sporting achievement. It was a symbol of resilience, a testament to their ability to rise against the odds. The streets filled with celebrations, voices echoed with joy, and for a brief moment, the entire nation united in pride. In a country often divided by political and social struggles, this win gave the people something to believe in, a sense of hope that they, too, could achieve greatness. This victory was not just the peak of his cricketing career, it was the beginning of a larger mission. It showed him the power of leadership, the impact of inspiring people, and the responsibility that comes with success. He realized that if he could bring his country victory on the field, he could also fight for change beyond the world of sports. The same passion that drove him to lift the World Cup would soon fuel his desire to uplift his nation. True greatness is not measured solely by personal achievements, but by the impact one has on the lives of others. For many, winning a World Cup would have been the ultimate accomplishment, a reason to retire in glory and enjoy the fruits of success. But for this man, that victory was only a stepping stone to something much bigger, a lifelong commitment to giving back to society. His journey into philanthropy was not a calculated decision. It was deeply personal, driven by pain, loss, and an unwavering desire to make a difference. The defining moment that changed his perspective came when he witnessed the suffering of a loved one due to cancer. Seeing firsthand the emotional and financial struggles that families faced while seeking treatment, he realized the immense burden this disease placed on ordinary people, especially in a country where access to quality healthcare was a privilege few could afford. This experience was a turning point. He could have walked away, sympathized from a distance, and continued his celebrated life. But he chose a different path. With a vision to ensure that no one in his country had to suffer due to a lack of medical treatment, he embarked on an ambitious mission to build a state-of-the-art cancer hospital that would provide free treatment to those who could not afford it. It was an idea many dismissed as unrealistic. Building such a hospital required not only immense financial resources, but also overcoming bureaucratic challenges, skepticism, and logistical hurdles. Yet, he refused to be discouraged. He took it upon himself to make this dream a reality. He traveled across the world, meeting people from all walks of life, sharing his vision, and urging them to contribute to this noble cause. He knocked on doors, attended fundraisers, and used his personal influence to inspire generosity. His relentless passion and credibility as a national hero convinced people to believe in his cause. Donations poured in, not just from wealthy donors, but from ordinary citizens who saw in him a leader who genuinely cared. Years of tireless effort finally bore fruit when the hospital was inaugurated. It was not just a medical facility. It was a symbol of hope, compassion, and the power of collective effort. The hospital was built to serve everyone, regardless of their financial status, proving that quality healthcare should not be a privilege, but a basic right. People who once had no options, no hope, now had access to world-class treatment, all because one man dared to dream and refuse to give up. But his philanthropic vision did not stop there. Understanding that true change comes through education and empowerment, he turned his attention to another pressing issue: the lack of quality higher education. He envisioned an institution that would provide world-class education to students who could not afford it, breaking the cycle of poverty and opening doors to new opportunities. This led to the establishment of a university dedicated to producing future leaders, equipped with the knowledge and skills to uplift their communities. His philanthropic efforts were not driven by political motives or personal gain. They were born out of a genuine desire to uplift society, to give back to the people who had supported him throughout his journey. Even when he transitioned into politics, his charitable work remained at the heart of his identity, proving that true leadership is about service. His contributions in healthcare and education have left an indelible mark on his nation. He did not just donate money. He built institutions that continue to change lives every day. Through his actions, he demonstrated that leadership is not just about holding a position of power, but about using influence to create real, lasting change. His journey from a sportsman to a philanthropist is a testament to the fact that true success is measured not by what we achieve for ourselves, but by what we do for others. For many, transitioning from sports to politics would seem like an impossible leap. The world of competitive sports is driven by skill, teamwork, and discipline, whereas politics is often seen as a battlefield of power struggles, deception, and compromise. Yet, for this man, the journey from cricket to politics was not a sudden shift but a natural evolution of his mission to serve his people. He had already led his country to victory on the cricket field and had built institutions that transformed lives through philanthropy. But he knew that real change, lasting, meaningful change, could only come from fixing the system itself. His decision to enter politics was not met with universal support. Many believed he was naive, that he did not understand the complexities of governance, and that he would be no match for the well-established political dynasties that had controlled the country for decades. They saw him as an outsider, someone who had spent his life in sports and charity but had no experience dealing with the ruthless nature of politics. Even his well-wishers feared that his honesty, idealism, and straightforward approach would not survive in an arena where power was often gained through manipulation rather than merit. But he was not one to back down from a challenge. Just as he had fought against the odds in cricket and philanthropy, He entered politics with the same determination and resilience. He was not motivated by wealth or personal ambition. He had already achieved more fame and success than most could dream of. His goal was simple yet profound: to challenge the corrupt elite, to give power back to the people, and to create a system based on justice and fairness. The early years were incredibly tough. When he founded his political party, it was met with skepticism, even ridicule. In a political landscape dominated by powerful families, military influence, and entrenched corruption, his party struggled to gain traction. He faced electoral defeats, betrayals from close allies, and relentless criticism from opponents and the media. Many expected him to quit, to walk away like others before him who had tried and failed. But he was not one to accept defeat easily. Instead of giving up, he used each setback as a lesson. He built his party from the ground up, traveling across the country, meeting ordinary citizens, and listening to their struggles. While traditional politicians relied on family dynasties and backdoor deals, he connected directly with the people. His rallies grew larger, his message of justice and accountability began to resonate, and a new political movement started taking shape. One of his most remarkable achievements was his ability to engage the youth. For decades, politics had been dominated by the same old faces, leaving young people disillusioned and disconnected from the system. But he gave them a reason to believe. His speeches were filled with passion, hope, and a call for action. He inspired a generation to take interest in the country's future, to demand change, and to believe that politics was not just a game for the elite, it was a tool for the people to reclaim their rights. Despite growing popularity, his journey remained difficult. He was up against a system that had been designed to protect those in power, a system that did not welcome outsiders who threatened the status quo. He faced media blackouts, allegations, and legal battles. His character was attacked, his intentions questioned, and his every move scrutinized. Yet he refused to compromise on his principles. After years of struggle, what once seemed impossible became reality. His party, which had once been mocked for being insignificant, emerged as a formidable political force. He proved that with patience, perseverance, and unwavering belief, even the most entrenched systems could be challenged. His rise in politics was not the result of wealth or influence. It was the result of genuine public support, earned through years of tireless effort. His entry into politics was not just about winning an election. It was about changing the very culture of politics itself. He wanted to replace corruption with transparency, favoritism with meritocracy, and apathy with activism. Even as he faced opposition from those who had long benefited from the old system, he remained steadfast in his vision for a better, fairer nation. His journey into politics is a lesson in resilience, courage, and the power of one individual to inspire a movement. He proved that politics does not have to be a dirty game reserved for the privileged few. It can be a platform for real change, driven by integrity and service to the people. In a nation where corruption had long been ingrained in the political and bureaucratic systems, challenging the status quo was never going to be easy. For decades, power had been concentrated in the hands of a few, and governance often served personal interests rather than the public good. Institutions meant to uphold justice were manipulated, economic policies were driven by favoritism, and the voices of the common people were drowned out by the influence of the elite. When he entered politics, he did not do so to maintain the existing system. He came with a mission to dismantle it. His primary focus was on accountability and justice, ensuring that those who had looted the country's wealth would be held responsible. He spoke openly about the entrenched corruption that had drained national resources, widened the gap between the rich and poor, and left the country struggling with debt and economic instability. His message was clear. If the nation was to prosper, corruption had to be eradicated, and those responsible had to be brought to justice. However, fighting corruption was not just about delivering speeches or making promises. It meant taking on some of the most powerful figures in the country, people who had ruled for generations, built extensive networks of influence, and had the means to silence anyone who posed a threat. His crusade against corruption was met with fierce resistance. Those in power were not willing to let go of their privileges, and they used every tool at their disposal to weaken his movement. One of the biggest challenges he faced was the manipulation of state institutions. The judicial system, law enforcement agencies, and even the media had, for years, been used to protect the corrupt elite rather than to serve the people. When he demanded accountability, cases against powerful individuals were delayed or dismissed. On the other hand, he and his supporters were subjected to scrutiny, legal battles, and politically motivated cases designed to discredit them. Despite these challenges, he remained undeterred. He called for greater transparency in governance, pushing for reforms that would prevent financial embezzlement and hold public officials accountable. He introduced policies that required the journey from being an underdog in politics to leading a nation was anything but smooth. In a political landscape dominated by well-established dynasties and powerful elites, breaking through as an outsider required not just determination, but an unshakable belief in change. His rise to power was not overnight. It was built on years of perseverance, countless setbacks, and an unwavering commitment to his vision. In the beginning, few took him seriously. His political party was dismissed as insignificant, and critics ridiculed his attempts to challenge the deeply entrenched political system. Election after election, he faced defeat. Many urged him to abandon politics and return to a more comfortable life, but he refused. He understood that real change does not come easily, and he was willing to endure the struggles necessary to achieve it. Instead of backing down, he doubled his efforts. He traveled across the country, speaking directly to the people, farmers, laborers, students, and the working class, those who had long been ignored by traditional politicians. His message resonated with them because he was not offering empty promises. He was speaking about justice, accountability, and the urgent need to break free from the cycle of corruption that had held the nation back for decades. A turning point in his rise came when he harnessed the power of mass mobilization. Unlike traditional parties that relied on family influence or financial muscle, he built a movement from the ground up. His rallies grew in size, his speeches became more impactful, and, most importantly, he captured the imagination of the youth. For the first time in decades, young people saw a leader who spoke their language, who understood their frustrations, and who gave them hope for a better future. Social media also played a crucial role in his rise. While mainstream media was often controlled by those who opposed him, he turned to digital platforms to communicate directly with the public. His campaign was not just about politics. It became a movement driven by people who believed in his vision. Millions of volunteers, many of them young and passionate, worked tirelessly to spread his message. This digital revolution allowed him to bypass traditional political barriers and connect with voters like never before. Despite his growing popularity, the road to power was still filled with obstacles. He faced relentless attacks from political opponents who saw him as a threat to their decades-long rule. Allegations, legal cases, and smear campaigns were launched against him in an attempt to derail his movement. But every attempt to weaken him only seemed to strengthen his resolve. His defining moment came when he led his party to a historic electoral victory. It was a moment that shocked the political establishment and sent a clear message: the people wanted change. For the first time, someone who had started as an outsider with no political background had risen to the highest office through sheer perseverance and public support. However, the challenges did not end with victory. The expectations were immense, and the responsibility of leading a nation in turmoil was heavier than ever. The same forces that had tried to prevent his rise now sought to undermine his leadership, making his time in office one of the most challenging periods of his life. Yet, through it all, he remained committed to the ideals that had brought him to power in the first place. Rising to power was only the beginning. Governing a nation, especially one burdened with deep-rooted political, economic, and institutional challenges, was an entirely different battle. The moment he assumed leadership, he inherited a country struggling with financial crises, social inequality, political divisions, and institutional corruption. The expectations were immense. People believed he would transform the country overnight, but change, especially on such a large scale, was never going to be immediate or easy. One of the first and most urgent challenges he faced was the economy. The country was drowning in debt due to years of financial mismanagement, corruption, and unsustainable borrowing by previous governments. Inflation was rising, foreign reserves were depleting, and unemployment was a growing concern. He had promised economic reforms, but fixing a broken system required time, tough decisions, and sacrifices. He sought international partnerships, secured financial aid, and pushed for policies that encouraged investment and industrial growth. However, economic recovery is never linear, and every decision was met with scrutiny and resistance, both from political opponents and from those unwilling to give up their financial privileges. Another major challenge was tackling corruption, the very issue he had built his political movement around. He had vowed to bring transparency, but dismantling decades of entrenched corruption was like fighting a war on multiple fronts. Corrupt officials resisted accountability, institutions were reluctant to change, and political adversaries used every opportunity to obstruct his efforts. Whenever he pushed for reforms, he faced legal battles, media attacks, and accusations aimed at discrediting him. Despite these hurdles, he remained steadfast in his mission, launching anti-corruption campaigns and pushing for judicial and bureaucratic reforms to ensure a fairer system. The political landscape he stepped into was also highly polarized. Unlike traditional politicians who maintained power through alliances and compromises, he had risen to prominence as an independent force, which meant he had many enemies. Opposition parties, unable to accept a new leader disrupting the old order, frequently launched protests, filed legal cases, and even used media influence to spread narratives against him. His government faced constant political instability, with efforts to undermine him from within and outside the system. Coalition partners, often essential for governance, made demands that at times conflicted with his vision, forcing him to balance between pragmatism and principles. Foreign relations presented yet another challenge. Leading a country with a complex geopolitical position meant navigating delicate international relationships. His stance on various global issues sometimes put him at odds with powerful nations. He advocated for sovereignty and independent policymaking, refusing to bow to external pressures, which made diplomatic negotiations more complex. Balancing relationships with neighboring countries while ensuring national security and economic stability required strategic decision-making and careful diplomacy. Beyond politics and economics, he also had to address pressing social issues. Education, healthcare, poverty, and unemployment were among the concerns that directly affected the people who had voted for him. His government worked on initiatives to improve social welfare, build housing for the poor, and expand healthcare services. However, systemic reforms take time, and the impatience of the public, fueled by media narratives and opposition propaganda, often created frustration. People wanted immediate results, and when change didn't happen as quickly as they expected, criticism grew. Perhaps one of the most challenging aspects of his leadership was dealing with the immense expectations placed upon him. He was not just seen as a politician, he was seen as a symbol of hope. Millions believed he would single-handedly fix all the problems the country had accumulated over decades. However, governance is a complex process, requiring not only strong leadership but also institutional cooperation. While he remained committed to his vision, the reality of politics meant that compromises were sometimes necessary, something that disappointed certain supporters who expected absolute change without obstacles. Despite these challenges, his leadership remained defined by resilience. He faced betrayals, legal battles, economic crises, and political opposition, yet he continued to fight for his vision. His tenure was a test of endurance, proving that true leadership is not about avoiding difficulties, but confronting them head-on, regardless of the resistance one faces. No leader who challenges the status quo can expect an easy path, and his journey in politics was marked by constant struggles against powerful forces determined to maintain control. From the moment he entered politics, he faced relentless opposition, not just from rival political parties, but also from entrenched institutions, powerful elites, and influential figures who saw him as a threat to their decades-long dominance. His rise was unconventional, his leadership style was direct, and his commitment to accountability disrupted the established order. This made him a target of political attacks, legal battles, and smear campaigns designed to weaken his influence and remove him from power. One of the biggest challenges he faced was the resistance from the traditional political elite. For decades, power had remained within a select few families and groups who controlled the country's wealth, resources, and institutions. These figures were not willing to give up their privileges easily. They saw his anti-corruption stance as a direct threat to their way of operating, and they used every possible means to undermine him. False allegations, character assassinations, and media propaganda became routine tactics to discredit him in the eyes of the public. Every policy he introduced was met with fierce resistance, and every attempt at reform was obstructed by those who benefited from the old system. Legal battles became another key weapon used against him. Cases were filed, investigations were launched, and politically motivated charges were brought against him to create an image of controversy and wrongdoing. The objective was not just to damage his reputation but to tie him up in legal proceedings, making it harder for him to focus on governance and reform. Despite these challenges, he faced every accusation head-on, refusing to be intimidated by the legal and institutional pressures designed to force him out. The media played a significant role in his political struggles. While he had a strong base of support among the people, much of the mainstream media was controlled by powerful interest groups aligned with his opponents. Negative narratives were pushed, his speeches were misrepresented, and his policies were often portrayed in a misleading manner. Even when he made genuine efforts to improve the country, the media often focused on controversies rather than achievements. In response, he turned to alternative platforms, particularly social media, to communicate directly with the people. This move proved to be effective, as it allowed him to bypass traditional media gatekeepers and spread his message unfiltered. His battles were not only external, internal challenges also posed significant hurdles. Politics is a game of alliances, and while he had a clear vision, he sometimes had to work with individuals and groups who did not fully share his ideals. Managing coalition partners and political allies proved to be difficult, as many had their own interests and agendas. Some of those who initially supported him later turned against him when their expectations were not met, leading to betrayals and political instability. One of the most significant struggles he faced was maintaining his government amidst repeated attempts to destabilize it. No-confidence motions, political maneuvering, and behind-the-scenes deals between opposition groups were constantly in play. The forces that had ruled the country for decades were not willing to let him govern peacefully, and every move he made was met with counter-strategies designed to weaken his position. Despite enjoying massive public support, he often found himself battling a system designed to protect the old guard. His political struggles also extended beyond the borders of his country. His independent stance on foreign policy, his refusal to bow to international pressure, and his commitment to national sovereignty made him a controversial figure in global politics. Some foreign powers, accustomed to dealing with compliant leaders, were uncomfortable with his approach. His stance on international issues sometimes led to tensions, as he prioritized national interests over external influences. This created further challenges, as both domestic and foreign forces worked to limit his ability to govern effectively. The journey of a leader who challenges entrenched systems is never without consequence. For years, he had fought against political dynasties, corrupt elites, and institutions resistant to change. His rise to power was a testament to the will of the people, but the very forces he had spent his career opposing never stopped working against him. His tenure as a leader was marked by constant struggles, and those who had once underestimated him now saw him as their biggest threat. They realized that as long as he remained in power, their control over the country's wealth and institutions would continue to weaken. Thus, they intensified their efforts to remove him, using every tool at their disposal. His removal from power was not the result of a simple electoral defeat or a loss of public support. Instead, it was a carefully orchestrated political maneuver, involving a combination of legal battles, media campaigns, and backdoor deals between powerful groups. Opposition parties, despite their deep differences, united with a singular goal: to end his rule. They were joined by influential figures within the bureaucracy, judiciary, and even international actors who preferred a more compliant leadership. The result was a coordinated effort to destabilize his government and force him out. One of the first signs of this effort was the increasing legal challenges against him. Cases that had been dormant for years were suddenly revived, and new allegations emerged overnight. Accusations of misconduct, corruption, and even treason were thrown at him, all aimed at creating an image of instability and wrongdoing. The legal system, often influenced by powerful interests, was used as a weapon rather than a means of justice. Despite having built his career on integrity and accountability, he found himself constantly defending against politically motivated charges. At the same time, economic pressures were deliberately amplified. While he had inherited an already fragile economy, efforts were made to exacerbate financial instability. Political uncertainty led to investor hesitation, economic decisions were sabotaged by key institutions, and narratives of economic failure were spread through media channels. The aim was to create frustration among the people, turning public sentiment against him. Media played a crucial role in this campaign. Once again, controlled by powerful elites, television networks, newspapers, and online platforms were flooded with negative coverage. His achievements were downplayed, and his challenges were exaggerated. Any crisis was blamed directly on him, regardless of the underlying causes. Even his most loyal supporters were targeted, with narratives designed to create division within his base. The most decisive move against him came in the form of political maneuvering within the legislative system. A no-confidence motion was initiated, backed by opposition parties that had long been his rivals. Behind closed doors, negotiations took place, alliances were formed, and key political figures were pressured or incentivized to switch sides. Some of his own allies, either out of fear or personal interest, turned against him at the last moment. The result was a dramatic political coup, executed not through the will of the people, but through institutional manipulation. Despite the overwhelming pressure, he did not go down without a fight. He took his case to the public, holding rallies, delivering speeches, and exposing the backdoor dealings that led to his removal. His message was clear. This was not just an attack on him, but an attack on the democratic will of the people. Millions of supporters took to the streets, protesting against what they saw as an unjust and undemocratic move. However, the institutions that had aligned against him ensured that the transition happened swiftly, leaving him with no choice but to step down. His removal from power was not the end of his struggle. It was the beginning of a new phase in his political journey. He had been forced out, but his influence had not faded. If anything, his removal only strengthened his narrative, proving to his supporters that the battle he had been fighting was real. Even after being removed from power, his impact on the political landscape did not fade. If anything, his departure ignited a new wave of support, proving that his influence was far greater than just holding office. His political journey had never been about personal ambition, it was about changing the system, and that mission did not end with his removal. Instead, his legacy became even more powerful, as millions of people who once supported him from a distance now felt personally connected to his struggle. His removal from office was meant to weaken him, to break his spirit, and to discourage his supporters. But it had the opposite effect. Instead of disappearing from the political scene, he returned with even greater strength, using the very injustices against him as proof of the system's corruption. He spoke directly to the people, holding mass rallies, delivering fiery speeches, and exposing the backdoor dealings that had led to his ousting. His message was simple. This was not just a battle for his own leadership, but a fight for the future of the country. The most striking aspect of his post-leadership phase was how he remained a dominant force in politics despite not holding any official position. Unlike traditional politicians who fade away after losing power, he continued to inspire massive public support. His rallies attracted unprecedented crowds, proving that his popularity was not tied to his position in government, but to his vision and leadership. Even those who were once skeptical of him began to see him as the only leader capable of challenging the corrupt elite. One of the most significant aspects of his legacy was the political awareness he created among ordinary citizens. Before him, politics was seen as a game played by a privileged few, where common people had little say. But he changed that. He encouraged youth participation, mobilized the middle class, and gave the working class a sense of empowerment. People who had never taken an interest in governance now followed every political development closely, realizing that their voices mattered. His movement was no longer just about him. It had evolved into a national awakening. However, his continued influence was met with fierce opposition. The same forces that had removed him from power now sought to eliminate him entirely from politics. A campaign was launched to disqualify him, to imprison him, and to silence his voice. Legal battles intensified, media censorship increased, and efforts were made to dismantle his political party. His allies were pressured, his supporters were targeted, and even his personal security became a concern. Yet, through every challenge, he remained defiant. His ability to connect with the people was his greatest strength. Even when he was prevented from appearing on mainstream media, he found ways to communicate directly with his supporters through social media and public gatherings. Every attempt to silence him only strengthened the belief among his followers that he was fighting against an unjust system. His name became more than that of a political leader. It became a symbol of resistance, of accountability, and of hope for a better future. Despite facing imprisonment, legal disqualification, and political bans, he continued to shape the national conversation. His influence was so strong that even his opponents had to acknowledge that he remained the most popular leader in the country. Elections, court rulings, and political strategies were all shaped by the question of how to deal with his enduring presence. The political establishment realized that removing him from office was one thing, but removing him from the hearts and minds of the people was an entirely different challenge. His legacy was also reflected in the institutions he sought to build. Whether it was in governance, social welfare, or public awareness, the changes he introduced had long-term effects. His push for transparency, his fight against corruption, and his efforts to uplift the poor remained central topics in national discourse. Even after his removal, his policies and reforms influenced future leaders, proving that his impact extended far beyond his time in office. Through his resilience, he redefined leadership. He proved that true power does not come from a title or an official position, it comes from the people. His struggle continued, not just as a personal mission, but as a movement that transcended political boundaries. Whether in power or out of it, he remained the most influential political figure, proving that some leaders are not defined by the offices they hold, but by the ideals they stand for. His journey has been one of resilience, defiance, and an unbreakable connection with the people. He has faced obstacles that would have ended the careers of most politicians: relentless opposition, legal battles, and even removal from power. Yet his influence has only grown stronger. His ability to inspire, to mobilize, and to challenge the status quo has left an indelible mark on the nation's political landscape. But his story is not just about him. It is about the millions who believe in his vision. It is about the people who have found their voices, who have awakened to the reality of their country's challenges, and who refuse to accept a system built on corruption and injustice.